Well, good morning and welcome to CMMC Unacknowledged, where we answer the unanswered questions that were asked during the monthly CMMC-AB Townhall meetings. My name is Todd Stanton. I'm the Regional Sales Manager for all things CMMC at Etactics. As always, I'm joined by Ty Wittenberg. Ty is the Senior Information Assurance Manager at Rain Associates. Welcome, Ty.
Hey, good morning, Todd. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for being here. All right. This is the last in a series of conversations that we've been having about CUI. And today we're going to talk about who has access to controlled and classified information. So my question specifically is, can foreign nationals have access to CUI?
This is really a tough question for me because, there are vendors that the Department of Defense does business with that are outside of the United States, right? So, if you look at the National Archives, they'll speak to you a little bit about limited dissemination of controls. If you talk about CMMC and folks who can do assessments in your environment, they can't be foreign nationals, or you can't have foreign national RPs or C3PAOs yet.
Ownership, right?
Obviously there's a little bit, there's not some unity here amongst the different branches of the service in regards to this, but there is some controlled unclassified information within those government contracts that are exposed. So I don't know the whole inner workings to that, but I would think that it would be no different than top secret clearances and vetting processes have to go through for those foreign nationals that are working on projects for the Department of Defense to have access to that information. But if you are a small manufacturer or organization here in the United States, especially with ITAR rules and things like that as well too, you cannot allow foreign nationals within your organization that are not naturalized citizens that are on visas to be able to access that controlled and classified information.
And there's a distribution statement about no foreign nationals, right? Like no foreign, isn't that a marking that can be used to identify documents that cannot be shared with foreign nationals?
That is correct.
And so, some of the exceptions that I found to accessing CUI, absent the no foreign marking, non-U.S. citizens employed by DoD may receive CUI if access is within scope of their assigned duties. So, these are people employed by DoD, or access would further the execution of a DoD undertaking.
Yep.
Access is not detrimental to a DoD interest or the U.S. government. There's no contract restriction prohibiting access, and it complies with DoD 8500-01E and 5200-2.2-R and export control regulations. So,
right.
It seemed like there's a lot of different, legal convergences here when we have CUI that would be accessed by, somebody outside the U.S. or non-U.S. citizen. A lot, like you mentioned, ITAR and some of the other, regulations that might apply. So I think that it is something that you want to take a very close look at before sharing CUI with a non-U.S. citizen, correct?
For sure. I mean, and you just rattled off a ton of references there. A real simple reference is if you just go to the National Archives, right, and it gives you some general dissemination principles that as an organization here in the United States can help you navigate your execution or questions that you need to ask to ensure that you're doing your due diligence to safeguard that information. One of the things that I found particularly interesting in there was the line that says agencies may place limits on disseminating the CUI beyond for a lawful government purpose only through the use of limited dissemination controls. And then it has a list below in the National Archives, right? So simple place to go would be the National Archives, but then Todd rattled off a bunch for you as well too around NIST around the DoD information, DODI 5200 regs that you guys could take a look at as well too.
And I think, if you did want to share it, there's even a non-disclosure agreement that must be approved by an appropriate DoD component before that information can be shared.
For sure. I would just hope that for organizations that are listening to us here that are in the United States and might be in that small or medium category, if you do have somebody that's working with you or in your organization that's a foreign national, just make sure that you're asking them the right questions and doing your due diligence. Not only to safeguard you, safeguard them as an employee, and then, also make sure that, we're making sure we defend our intellectual property is what I've been calling it for CUI, especially if it's tied to warfighter or national security.
So I'm going to ask you a difficult scenario then, based on this being a tough topic here. So, small business, and this is a real world example I just had earlier this week. Small business whose parent company is in Europe. The U.S. subsidiary produces a commercial off-the-shelf product, but for DoD, they make that small modification, but they modify it so that now they realize that what they have created is CUI as part of the performance of the contract. And the parent company in Europe wants to have access to that information, right? So the question was, can they have access to that information? So I kind of go back to this checklist here. Is it within the assigned scope of their assigned duties for the European country to, have access to it? I don't really think that it would be, right? I mean, is there a reason, does it further DoD's, mission if the European parent company has access to this information? And it doesn't seem like, from the brief conversation I had, that it did.
My opinion is in alignment with yours that it does not. Obviously the parent company, or not obviously, if I could ask a question, the parent company performs the same type of work in Europe that the subsidiary does here stateside?
It's a commercial off-the-shelf product, but the U.S. subsidiary had modified it for DoD. So, the contract is with the U.S. subsidiary. I think had the contract been with the European parent, now there's a reason to know, right? And it furthers DoD's mission. So I think that's where the line I would draw is, what reason, what benefit does DoD get out of the European parent company having access to this information? It doesn't seem to further their mission if they're able to perform the contract without them having that, right?
Right. The only way I could see that being relevant, right, is that information needed to be moved over to the parent because they were about to. And so hopefully your example that you're talking about, if they're listening, I'm not saying that your parent company in Europe is going to close your doors, right? But if you were going to close the door so that small and take in all that intellectual property, obviously I think you would have to go through some of the rebidding process on that contract or get confirmation for it to come over. Those aren't my areas of expertise, to be honest with you. You would definitely have to talk with somebody who deals with mergers and acquisitions, have a really strong attorney to ensure that, that comes over and you get the approval of the Department of Defense to maintain that contract. But to your point, yes, that in my mind, there's no need for the parent company in Europe to have that information for that modification, which is now no longer a commercial off the shelf. So, we've talked about this before, that commercial off the shelf, if you've made any modification to it for specificity for a contract and, something that's germane to nation state or warfighter, it's not commercial off the shelf anymore. You and I cannot go to a local gasket place or a hardware place and buy that anymore because it is specific to that contract in that particular phase of the development or production. So, no, my answer is no. Final answer.
Let's put a slight twist on it and see if your answer changes. So now let's say the prime, whoever awarded that contract to this US-based subsidiary, comes back and says, we want you to enhance this product a little bit more and make some additional modifications to it. And the US company doesn't have the resources. The actual engineering team is in Europe. They're the ones who designed the commercial off-the-shelf product. So now we've got to engage these non-US citizens in Europe who are at the parent company to come in and help that modification. Does that at all change, your opinion as to whether or not now there might be a reason for, sharing that information as it might further DoD's mission?
So I'm going to ask two questions. Is it the actual modification of the product with those engineers, or is it modification of the quality control to confirm that it works?
I would say the product itself.
Okay. So quality control would not be a problem. In my mind, partnering with them to modify it will require you to go back up the food chain and get approval and vetting, not only from whoever your client is, but ultimately they would have to request and get vetting and approval from the Department of Defense. That could take time in the project that they don't want to do. And from a business decision, even though it'd be easier to run it up the pipeline with the engineers in-house that you already have and know, you could potentially expect for speed to production, FIFO, first in, first out, that you have to find somebody who's vetted, probably potentially done their SPUR score in the procurement integrated portal, and find a vendor that way, that in the US that can accomplish that goal for you.
Interesting. Okay. Well, always a pleasure to hear your thoughts on these subjects. I know they're not easy topics, but we'll just, close this one out by saying, when in doubt, maybe seek some legal counsel, and ask about, what laws may be, in play in terms of the type of information that you're dealing with, and what the process would be to actually provide that access, right? There's obviously some forms that would have to be signed once the approval is made, right?
Some vetting and some forms assigned, for sure. No different than like a non-disclosure agreement, right? And I'm making it very simplistic. So your advice is fantastic. Find an attorney, take some advice. I haven't actually done research in the CMMC accreditation body marketplace, but I would have to believe, based off of the gentleman, Bob Metzger, that you like to talk about a lot, that there's got to be some potential attorneys that are also in the information security RP space, that are RPOs in that space and are well versed in CMMC, defense contracting. All of those things are going to be critical in making sure that you don't expose yourself to risk.
And, I feel like months ago, they talked about how these non-US based companies that are contractors for DoD would go through the certification process, right? Because like you mentioned earlier, C3PAO cannot be a foreign held company. They have to be US based. So how is a company in France, who is a contractor for DoD, going to get certified? Are we going to be flying assessors from the US to go to France to do? What are your thoughts on that?
I would say yes. It would be no different than some of the bigger firms out there that do audits and attestation work. So yeah, you're going to have some folks that are C3PAOs that are going to get a couple additional stamps on their passports, right? And they're going to fly over and they're going to vet these companies that have to be certified for CMMC levels. I don't think we've seen any of that yet, right? But that we're still trying to make the water clear around the CMC ruling, right? And now you and I just added another aspect. It's all messy is a bad word to say per se, but it's messy because business isn't exacting. It's always a little messy. So
it's complicated, to say the least.
It's complicated. Yeah, there we go. I think I think the CMMC and the DoD, as this journey continues and as we get closer to 2023, May 2023, all of the things that you and I are talking about obviously are also things that folks are thinking about. And some of that stuff will begin to formalize. I'd love to stamp the passport and go over to France and, be a RP or a C3PAO for that. Not that I'm advertising for that, but you know, that'd be a nice trip.
So if there's a company in France that wants to hire Ty Wittenberg, how can they get a hold of you?
You can reach out to us at Ray and Associates, particularly my email, ty.wittenberg, WHITTENBURG, at reacpa.com.
Perfect. Well, thank you for your time, Ty. I appreciate the conversations around CUI. I feel like I learned something. Hopefully you found the time worthwhile investment. And hopefully the people watching feel the same. So thank you again.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. Have a good one.